The Time Traveller's artifact. Archaeologist Dr. Elena Hart wiped the sweat from her brow as the afternoon sun bore down on the ancient ruins of Akhetep, a recently discovered site in the Egyptian desert. The excavation team had spent weeks carefully unearthing artifacts from the sand, uncovering relics that predated known dynasties. But nothing prepared them for what they found on that fateful day. It was a rectangular object, nestled deep in a sealed chamber beneath the ruins. The room, untouched for thousands of years, was covered in hieroglyphs describing a mysterious visitor from the stars. Elena's heart raced as she pried the artifact free. It was smooth, black, and cold to the touch, unlike anything she'd ever seen. "What do you think it is?" asked Ravi, her assistant, staring at the object. Elena turned it over in her hands. It was oddly lightweight for its size and had a reflective surface. A strange emblem, a circle split by a lightning bolt, was etched onto one side. It looked shockingly modern. "It's impossible," Elena whispered, her voice barely audible over the desert wind. She pressed a button-like indentation on the side, and the object hummed to life. A holographic projection burst forth, displaying a glowing map of Earth. Cities lit up and faded as the projection cycled through various time periods, showing landscapes morphing from lush forests to sprawling urban metropolises. The team gathered around in stunned silence. "This thing is technological," Ravi said, breaking the quiet. "But how? This site is over 5,000 years old." Elena didn't have an answer. She turned her attention to the hieroglyphs on the chamber walls. They depicted a figure dressed in a suit unfamiliar to ancient Egypt. A man surrounded by glowing lines, holding the very artifact in her hands. The hieroglyphs described him as the Traveller, sent to warn the people of Akhetep about an impending disaster. As the team debated its origins, another discovery shook them. Beneath the artifact was a fragment of papyrus, brittle with age. It was written in hieroglyphs and modern English. "To those who find this, beware the rift. It was never meant to be opened." Empty. The initials baffled Elena, but the warning was clear. Later that night, while the team celebrated the discovery back at camp, Elena sat alone in her tent, studying the artifact. She traced her fingers over the lightning bolt emblem, her thoughts racing. Who was MT? And how could someone from the future leave something in the distant past? Suddenly the artifact began to vibrate. Lights flickered within the tent, and Elena felt the ground shift beneath her. A figure materialized in front of her, a man in a sleek, silver suit. His face was obscured by a glowing visor. "You shouldn't have activated it," the man said, his voice distorted but clear. "This technology doesn't belong in this timeline." Elena froze. "Who are you?" "I'm Marcus Travers," he replied, lifting his visor to reveal a weary face. "A time traveler. And now, thanks to you, the rift is unstable." Before she could respond, the artifact emitted a piercing sound. Marcus grabbed it from her hands and adjusted the controls. "The artifact was meant to stay hidden," he explained hurriedly. "Its power can alter the course of history. If it falls into the wrong hands..." A loud crack split the air. The tent was torn away by a vortex of light and wind. Marcus and the artifact disappeared in an instant, leaving Elena alone in the silent desert. The next morning, the team found her sitting where the tent had been, staring at the horizon. "What happened?" Ravi asked. Elena shook her head. "The artifact, it's gone." She didn't tell them about Marcus or the rift. As far as the world was concerned, the artifact was a mystery that would never be solved. But Elena knew the truth. Somewhere, in the labyrinth of time, a traveler was racing to fix what had been broken. And she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The following weeks were a haze for Elena. The camp was buzzing with speculation about the artifact, even though she insisted it had vanished. Reports of her team's discovery leaked to the scientific community, and soon the site was swarming with journalists, rival archaeologists, and government officials. One evening, as Elena packed her notes in her tent, Ravi entered, holding a weathered journal. "I found this in the chamber we excavated. Thought you might want to see it," he said, placing it on the table. Elena opened the journal carefully. The pages were filled with strange symbols that mirrored the hieroglyphs on the walls, but interspersed were notes written in a language that wasn't ancient at all, modern English. The handwriting was precise but hurried, as if the writer didn't have much time. One passage caught her attention. "If you are reading this, then I failed to stop it. The rift grows. It begins with anomalies, objects out of place, people disappearing, moments that don't align. The key lies in the Traveller's code. Seek the ruins beneath the ice." Elena frowned. "Ruins beneath the ice?" Ravi leaned closer. You think it means Antarctica? Maybe, Elena said, her mind racing. The journal was signed with the same initials as the note they'd found, MT. Suddenly, the light in her tent flickered. A low hum filled the air, sending shivers down her spine. Not again, Elena whispered. Before she could react, the artifact, no, another artifact identical to the first, materialized on the table. Its surface glowed faintly, and beside it, a small metal device appeared, shaped like a compass but with no discernible markings. Elena, what? Ravi began, but a flash of light cut him off. Marcus Travers was back, looking more haggard than before. His suit was torn and his face was pale. He slammed the artifact shut, silencing its hum, and turned to Elena. You opened it again? He snapped. I didn't, she protested. It appeared out of nowhere. Marcus stared at the artifact, then at the strange compass-like device. He sighed. It's worse than I thought. The rift is destabilizing faster than I calculated. That journal, it wasn't supposed to be here yet. What do you mean, yet? Ravi asked, stepping forward. Marcus hesitated, then spoke quickly. The rift is a tear in time itself, a wound caused by experiments in my future. Artifacts like this one are slipping through. They're breadcrumbs leading to catastrophic events. Someone, or something, is using them to manipulate history. Elena held up the journal. This mentions ruins beneath the ice. What does that mean? Marcus's eyes widened. The origin point. It's where the rift began, buried deep beneath Antarctica. If we can reach it, we might have a chance to seal it. And what happens if we don't? Ravi asked. The anomalies will grow, Marcus said grimly. Time will unravel. Past, present, and future will collide. Elena exchanged a glance with Ravi, her resolve hardening. Then we need to get to Antarctica. Within days they were en route to the icy continent. Funded by an anonymous benefactor Marcus refused to identify, the expedition was outfitted with state-of-the-art equipment. Marcus carried the artifact and the strange compass, which he explained was a temporal locator, designed to guide them to the rift's origin point. The journey was treacherous. Blizzards battered their convoy and strange phenomena plagued their progress. At one point they encountered a 19th-century shipwreck frozen in the ice, its crew perfectly preserved as if they'd been caught mid-motion. It's happening more often, Marcus muttered, consulting the compass. We're close. Finally they reached a cavern hidden beneath a glacier. Inside, the air was unnaturally warm, and the walls shimmered with an otherworldly light. At the center of the chamber stood a massive stone archway, covered in symbols identical to those on the artifact. This is it, Marcus said, his voice a mix of awe and fear. The rift's gateway. Before Elena could respond, the artifact in Marcus's hand began to glow, and the archway sprang to life, swirling with a vortex of light and shadow. A deafening roar filled the chamber as the rift opened fully. Figures emerged from the vortex, shadowy humanoid forms that flickered like static. They moved with unnatural speed, their intentions unclear but clearly hostile. Protect the gateway? Marcus shouted, handing the artifact to Elena. You have to seal it. Use the code. But how? She cried. The symbols, align them. Trust your instincts. As Marcus and Ravi fought off the shadowy figures, Elena approached the gateway, clutching the artifact. The symbols on the archway began to glow, reacting to her presence. She pressed the artifact against the center of the arch, and suddenly visions flooded her mind. Memories of places she'd never been, people she'd never met, and a future that hung by a thread. One phrase repeated itself over and over. Time is a circle, but it must have a center. Elena aligned the symbols as instructed, her fingers moving as if guided by an unseen force. The gateway began to pulse, the vortex shrinking. No, a voice boomed. A shadowy figure larger than the others stepped forward, its form solidifying into something almost human. Its eyes burned with malice. You cannot undo what has been set in motion. Marcus tackled the figure, shouting, Seal it now, Elena. With a final push, she completed the sequence. The vortex imploded, sucking the shadowy figures and the gateway into itself. The artifact shattered in her hands and the chamber fell silent. When Elena opened her eyes, she was lying in the snow outside the cavern. Ravi and Marcus were beside her, alive but battered. It's done, Marcus said weakly. The rift is closed, for now. Elena helped him to his feet. What happens next? Marcus smiled faintly. Time moves forward as it should. But I have to keep watching. There are always more threads to untangle. He placed a hand on her shoulder. Thank you, Elena. You've done more than you know. With that, he activated a device on his wrist and disappeared into thin air, leaving Elena and Ravi alone beneath the Antarctic sky. As they made their way back to the surface, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that her journey with time had only just begun. The silence of the Antarctic tundra enveloped Elena and Ravi as they trudged back to their camp. Though they had succeeded in sealing the rift, the experience had left a mark, an unsettling awareness of forces beyond their comprehension. That night, as they sat by the warmth of a small heater in their tent, Ravi broke the silence. "Do you think this is really over?" he asked, his voice tinged with doubt. Elena shook her head. If Marcus was telling the truth, the rift might be closed, but the implications, they'll ripple through time. Who knows what's already been changed? Ravi frowned, his gaze distant. "I keep thinking about that shadowy figure, the one that tried to stop us. It spoke like it had a plan, like this was just a part of something bigger." Elena nodded, her thoughts echoing his unease. The creature's ominous words, "You cannot undo what has been set in motion," played over and over in her mind. 2 months later, Elena returned to her university in London, determined to resume a semblance of normal life. Yet the ordinary rhythm of lectures and research felt hollow. She couldn't ignore the growing anomalies reported around the world. Medieval artifacts appearing in modern cities, entire towns experiencing inexplicable power outages, and eyewitness accounts of strange, glowing figures vanishing into thin air. One evening, while she was cataloging artifacts in her office, she noticed something unusual. On her desk sat the compass-like device Marcus had used to navigate the rift. She didn't remember bringing it back from Antarctica. As she examined it, the device began to hum softly, its needle spinning wildly before settling on a fixed direction. Intrigued, and more than a little apprehensive, she grabbed her coat and followed the signal. The compass led her to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Its dilapidated exterior gave no indication of what lay within. As she stepped inside, the air felt thick, charged with an unexplainable energy. At the center of the room stood a makeshift lab. Monitors displayed streams of data, maps of the world, and images of ancient ruins. Among the chaos was a single glowing artifact, identical to the one she had encountered in Egypt. "Elena Hart," a voice called out, startling her. She turned to see a woman step out of the shadows. She was tall, with piercing eyes and an air of authority. Her attire was unlike anything Elena had seen, sleek, metallic, and adorned with glowing circuits. "Who are you?" Elena demanded. "My name is Seraph," the woman said. "I'm from the same future as Marcus Traveller'S. But unlike him, I'm here to ensure the anomalies persist." Elena tensed. "You want the rift to reopen?" Seraph smiled faintly. "Not just reopen. I want to control it. Time isn't meant to be linear, it's meant to be ours to command." Before Elena could respond, Seraph raised a hand, and the glowing artifact pulsed with energy. The compass in Elena's pocket vibrated violently as if in protest. "You closed the rift once," Seraph said, her tone calm but menacing. "But that was merely a wound. Time has fractures all over the world. And with this artifact, I'll make sure they never heal." Elena's mind raced. Seraph's words confirmed her worst fears. The battle wasn't over. It had only shifted to a new front. "You can't control time," Elena said, stepping forward. "It's too dangerous. You'll destroy everything." Seraph's eyes narrowed. "The only danger is in leaving it unchecked. And if you try to stop me again, you'll regret it." That night, Elena made a decision. She couldn't ignore what she'd seen. The world was unraveling and Marcus was nowhere to be found. If Seraph was manipulating time, there had to be a way to counter her. Using the notes from Marcus's journal and the strange compass, Elena began to piece together a plan. It was risky, but she knew she had no choice. She would have to become a traveler of time herself. In a hidden corner of her university lab, Elena worked tirelessly, reverse engineering the technology Marcus had left behind. Each night, the compass glowed brighter, as if urging her onward. One evening, as she calibrated the device, a familiar hum filled the room. A holographic projection of Marcus appeared, flickering and distorted. "Elena," he said, his voice urgent. "If you're seeing this, it means I've been delayed. The rift wasn't the only threat. There's another force at play, one even I didn't anticipate. You'll need to continue what I started. Find the Temporal Nexus. Stop Seraph. And whatever you do, don't trust." The message cut out, leaving Elena staring at the empty space where Marcus's image had been. Taking a deep breath, she activated the compass. Its needle spun wildly before locking onto a point in the distance. Elena knew this wasn't just an artifact hunt anymore. It was a race against time, one she couldn't afford to lose. As the world outside carried on, oblivious to the temporal war unfolding around it, Elena Hart stepped into the unknown, ready to rewrite the future before it was too late. The compass led Elena to a remote island in the Pacific, a place absent from most maps. She arrived at dawn, her small plane landing on a rugged beach. The island was dense with vegetation, but the compass's needle pulsed with a steady rhythm, guiding her inland. Hours later, she emerged into a clearing dominated by a massive stone structure. The ruins were ancient but radiated an energy that felt alive, as though they were waiting for her. At the center stood an enormous circular mechanism resembling a clock, with gears and dials spinning in ways that defied logic. This was the Temporal Nexus, the heart of the rift. Elena approached cautiously, her mind racing. If Seraph had spoken the truth, controlling the Nexus would give her unparalleled power over time itself. But if Seraph had reached the Nexus first, Elena was already too late. A low hum filled the air, and Elena turned to see Seraph step out from the shadows. She held the glowing artifact from the warehouse, now fully activated and pulsing with raw energy. "You're persistent, I'll give you that," Seraph said, smirking. "But this is where it ends?" Elena stood her ground. "You don't have to do this, Seraph. If you activate the Nexus, you won't just manipulate time, you'll shatter it. The past, present, and future will collapse into chaos." Seraph's expression hardened. "Chaos? No. Control. Humanity has stumbled blindly through history for too long. With the Nexus, I can shape time into a perfect continuum. No wars, no suffering, no mistakes. And no freedom," Elena countered. Seraph raised the artifact. "Freedom is overrated." The Nexus began to glow as Seraph activated the artifact. The gears spun faster, the hum growing into a deafening roar. Elena felt the ground tremble beneath her feet as reality itself seemed to ripple. Desperate, Elena pulled out the compass. Its needle spun wildly before locking onto a faint glowing panel on the Nexus. She sprinted toward it, dodging waves of temporal energy that distorted the air around her. "Stop!" Seraph shouted, aiming the artifact at Elena. A burst of energy shot out, narrowly missing her. Elena reached the panel and slammed the compass into it. The Nexus shuddered, and a holographic interface appeared, displaying the same symbols she had seen in Egypt and Antarctica. Elena's fingers moved instinctively, aligning the symbols as Marcus had shown her. Each alignment caused the Nexus to flicker, destabilizing Seraph's control. "No!" Seraph screamed. She hurled the artifact at Elena, but before it could strike, a familiar figure materialized between them. Marcus Traveller'S. His suit was battered, and his face showed the strain of countless battles across time, but his resolve was unshaken. He caught the artifact midair and turned to Elena. "Finish it," he shouted. Seraph lunged at Marcus, the two locking in a struggle as Elena focused on the final sequence. The Nexus roared in protest, its energy spiraling out of control. As Elena aligned the last symbol, the Nexus emitted a blinding light. The artifact in Marcus's hand shattered, and Seraph screamed as she was pulled into the collapsing rift. "Marcus?" Elena called out, but he turned to her with a faint smile. "This is my fight," he said. "The rift has to be sealed from within." Before she could protest, Marcus stepped into the light, disappearing alongside Seraph. The Nexus shuddered one last time before falling silent. The ruins darkened and the air grew still. Elena woke up on the beach where her plane had landed. The Nexus was gone, and the compass lay shattered beside her. The sun was setting, casting golden hues over the ocean. The world felt normal, quiet. Time had been saved, but at a cost. Back in London, life slowly returned to normal for Elena, though she knew she would never be the same. The Anomaly stopped and the world's timeline seemed stable. But she couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus was still out there, somewhere, fighting to keep time intact. One day, as she walked through the university, a student approached her with a package. "This came for you," they said. Inside was a worn journal, identical to the one she had found in Egypt. On the first page was a single note. "Time moves forward, but its protectors remain eternal. Thank you, Elena." Empty. Elena smiled softly and closed the journal. Though her journey had ended, she knew the fight for time was far from over. And if the Nexus ever stirred again, she would be ready.